First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for having invited me and others here for this conversation about Kashmir. We have seen that there is huge intolerance in India when people want to talk about Kashmir. Uh, there is resistance for listening to the Kashmiri voices. Uh, there are many people who claim that they are the mainstream of India and they uh, are not happy in allowing Kashmiris to speak. And they have tried their best to criminalize the Kashmir voices. And anyone who has tried to come to India and speak to Indian people has been attacked in the past. We have seen Hurriyat leaders who attempted in 1996 to come to different cities in India, like Hyderabad and Bombay, Bangalore, and many other places. Uh, for a while it was allowed, but later all of it was choked. Uh, when there is this intolerance in the Indian uh, government's approach, and also a large section of India's population which is neither interested in listening to Kashmiris nor interested in engaging in a resolution for Kashmir. Uh, One can imagine the level of frustration which goes up in Kashmir because people feel that India does not want to resolve Kashmir in a non-violent manner. Indians also legitimize a lot of them through their endorsement the crimes perpetrated by India in Kashmir. And there is a vast majority of Indians who remain silent on those crimes and thus are complicit in those crimes which are committed in Kashmir in their name, in the name of their security and in the name of India's democracy. India wants Kashmiris to say that India is a great democracy. India is great. And they want Kashmiris to surrender. And that's when Kashmiris will become good Muslims. Kashmiris are bad Muslims. Kashmiris are people who are violent. Kashmiris are people who are liars. Kashmiris are people who have deceived, who are eating up India's money and who cannot be trusted, who are traitors, anti-national. This is what we get to hear in most of the Indian cities. Chennai and I was yesterday in Coimbatore. These are some exceptions, but a vast majority of India has exactly responded to us like this. Uh, the contempt which Indian people have for Kashmir comes from the fact that Kashmiris have not uh, allowed themselves to be appropriated, have not allowed themselves to be, integrated in India's the so-called Hindutva secular, I would call it. That's the Hindu secular idea of India. We have not agreed to integrate ourselves in that. Kashmiris have refused to surrender last 7 decades. The struggle in Kashmir, a lot of the Indian commentators say that started in 1989 when armed uprising started in Jammu and Kashmir. That's a blatant lie, and they think that Kashmiris have forgotten the crimes perpetrated by India in last 7 decades. We haven't, and we won't. We remember very clearly that when India was struggling against British, Kashmiris were struggling against the Dogras. There was a Quit India movement and there was a Quit Kashmir movement. And we were fighting for our liberation then, when India was fighting for its liberation. And our movement had nothing to do with India. And Kashmir has its own history, and we are proud of our own history. So we, as a country, wanted to exist, and Pakistan was not there, by the way, then. So today there is a blame that Kashmiris are fighting because Pakistan sponsors them. But who sponsored us before 1947? We still wanted to be a free country then. India thinks that it can fool people of India, and a vast majority of Indians already want to believe that lie. But Kashmiris can't be fooled by these deceits. Kashmiris can't be fooled by these psyops. We know our history, we know our present, and we have the courage to dream. Dream for a free Kashmir. Kashmiri people have resisted in one way or the other against one occupation and the other. 1947 onwards, there is a movement existing in Jammu and Kashmir. There is not even a single day when there was no movement against India. It was initially led by Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, whose grandson was here yesterday, proudly claiming himself to be an Indian. But his grandfather, Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, was the first Prime Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. And he was arrested in 1953 because India feared that he might, under the influence of people of Jammu and Kashmir, but also international support, declare Kashmir's independence in 1953. To avoid that, he was arrested and kept in jail for 22 years. Arm twisted, gagged. Finally, Sheikh Abdullah surrendered. But Sheikh Abdullah surrendered, Kashmiris did not. And Sheikh Abdullah's son and his grandson surrendered for their vested interests. And many other people have chosen a similar kind of path for themselves. But collectively, Kashmiris have never given up. When Sheikh Abdullah gave up in 1975, there was already a transformation in the movement. There was younger generation ready to take the responsibility of the movement forward. The movement went ahead, and a new generation of leaders had emerged who at that point of time decided that they will fight India democratically through elections. And they contested elections. Syed Ali Shah Gilani, who is one of the most prominent leaders in Jammu and Kashmir today, has been elected in Jammu and Kashmir Assembly thrice. And Syed Salahuddin, who is the chief of Hizbul Mujahideen, also contested elections in 1987. And the elections were rigged. He was arrested and beaten up ruthlessly and jailed because he was winning. So they wanted to change the results, and in most of the constituencies this is what happened. India rigged the elections and people who were contesting were arrested, those who were supposed to win because of the popular support. So Yasin Malik was one of the campaigners for Syed Salahuddin, the chief of Hizbul Mujahideen. Yasin Malik later started the armed uprising in 1989. But these people, when they tried democratic means, they were deliberately pushed to the wall. It was the policy of the Indian government to push them to wall. Many of the young people felt that they have no choice but to call for arms and start an armed uprising in Kashmir. That's what people did. And there was popular support in 1989 for the armed uprising in Kashmir. But armed uprising was such that despite the fact that we had a lot of Kashmiri boys who had picked up arms, but their main demand, and a clear demand for most of the parties, was that they wanted India to have dialogue with Pakistan and the Kashmiri leadership. Kashmiri militants never, in the initial phase of militancy, claimed that they would drive India out. They would outgun India. Because India's military occupation in Kashmir means the presence of around 750,000 soldiers, along with the police. We have documented these figures, and it was released in one of the reports, which was not contested by government. So, if some of you who are interested in reading about this, the military structure of Indian Army in Jammu and Kashmir, please see our report, Structures of Violence. We have, in a very detailed manner, said how much Indian Army presence is there. So, the Kashmiri militants in 1990 did not have this illusion that they would outgun Indian Army from Kashmir, because obviously there was no match. That militancy still goes on. At present, we have, according to the government estimates, around 300 militants. The number of armed forces personnel remains the same. It is today between 650,000 to 750,000. Not much of a change. And what was happening is that because of this militancy, Kashmir issue, which was conveniently forgotten by Indian government, despite its promises to the people of Jammu and Kashmir since 1947 to 1960s, that they would hold a referendum in Jammu and Kashmir, and no referendum was ever held. Despite the fact that there are UN resolutions, 18 UN resolutions on Kashmir, Government of India conveniently delayed the resolution. And in the 1971 war between India and Pakistan, they arm twisted Pakistan in shifting the nomenclature of the India-Pakistan engagement on Kashmir. Because till then, 1971 war, because Pakistan lost, so they were arm twisted and they were asked to sign the Shimla Agreement. And according to the Shimla Agreement, it's a bilateral dispute. And they have said that now we will bilaterally resolve this. But if you see the trajectory of Indian discourse on Jammu and Kashmir, it has shifted. Initially in 1948, Jawaharlal Nehru said that they would not hold Kashmiris against their wishes, and they would allow a UN-held referendum in Jammu and Kashmir. And in 1953 to 1947 to 1964, we had our Prime Minister, we had our own President, we had the permit system for Indians to come to Kashmir. No Indian could come on their own to Kashmir. And it included Morarji Desai as well, who wanted to come, and many others, Shama Prasad Mukherjee as well. Shama Prasad Mukherjee was arrested, and he lost his life in the jail in Kashmir for crossing over to Kashmir without the permit. So that was the phase, and then that phase has changed over the time, and India was making irreversible changes in Jammu and Kashmir. They were arm twisting anyone, initially Sheikh Abdullah, then others who came to the power. They were forced to change the Kashmir constitution repeatedly. Internationally, India was saying that Kashmir is a dispute and they would resolve with Pakistan. But when it came to Pakistan, they would say that Kashmir is integral part. And when it came to Kashmiri people, they would say that what dispute? There is no dispute. So this changed. So India was changing its discourse in Kashmir, but on ground it was consolidating its presence. On ground it was ensuring that it divides Kashmiri people. The people of Jammu and Kashmir, there is Indian administered part which has around 13 million population, and then there is Pakistan administered Kashmir. I would focus on the Indian administered part of Kashmir. Since 1947, that part of the Pakistan administered Kashmir, which was according to the people of Pakistani administered Kashmir, they fought for it and they liberated that area. But Pakistan is not in denial about that place. Pakistan does not call that place as its integral part. Pakistan says very clearly that it's a disputed territory and would remain so till referendum and the final disposition of the conflict. And even the passports of the people of Pakistani administered Kashmir, they don't carry their identity as Pakistani nationals. In their passports, it's very clearly written that they are citizens of former state of Jammu and Kashmir. But what is happening in India? There was a time when we were allowed to speak that Kashmir is a conflict. But today, if we say it's a conflict, there is a sedition charge. there is a tag of anti-national. There is jail for us. We have been assaulted, attacked for having this opinion also now. There was a time when India said that they would engage with us and resolve the issue of Kashmir. But there is today a time when India is clearly refusing to even listen to the voices of Kashmiri people. Last year you saw Amnesty International organized a program in Bangalore on Kashmir impunity. It was not on political resolution of the conflict. It had nothing to do with politics. The program was attacked. But several other programs have been also attacked in Delhi and Bombay and other places. So this intolerance is increasing in India. We believe that it is increasing not just for Kashmiris, but also for Indian people, those who have a contrary view to the mainstream Indian government view. But a lot of Indian commentators are saying that it's because of BJP coming to power or RSS coming to power. As Kashmiris who have witnessed Indian brutality and the nakedness of Indian brutality, we can testify that it's not BJP. It is India, Indian institutions, which were mostly led by Congress. Congress, if BJP is the extreme right, Congress is right. We don't see Congress even as a centrist political party. What Congress did in Kashmir, the necessary lynching of Kashmiri Muslim and the necessary polarization of people of Jammu and Kashmir, this was done intentionally as an institutionalized policy of the Indian government. And this was done to control the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They may have succeeded in controlling Kashmir till now, but they have not been able to control the aspirations of the Kashmiri people. They are still there. And also what has happened is that there are gangs and groups of Indian people who assume this role unto themselves in India. The legitimization of lynching of Kashmiris by Indian army in Kashmir is having an impact in India as well. These gangs are doing the lynchings themselves, and they have never stopped. We have heard, and there is a lot of exaggeration of some of the recent cases, but if we see the history of independent India, the anti-Muslim riots, I have read different figures at different places. So conservative estimates is around 16,000 riots against Muslims in India in the independent India. Indian Muslims, according to the Sachar Committee report, are the second-class citizens, not even second-class citizens. Their situation is far worse than what it used to be of Dalits in 1947. Why would Kashmiris want to be part of such a country where Muslims of India, who have chosen to be part of India, who have consciously chosen to be Indians, if that is the treatment meted out to them? I think that there is nothing shining in India which attracts Kashmiri people. There are people, I just heard yesterday, there was a commentator on TV who said that despite 10 months of protests in Kashmir, why are Kashmiri faces glowing? Why are they still healthy? How do they get money to eat when they don't even work? When they are protesting and the markets are shut, there is no business. I would like to remind people of India and also that gentleman who had these comments, but it's not just that gentleman, it's a common perception of most of the Indians. Kashmir is not dependent on India. It was never. Indians are dependent on Kashmir. We have not had a single hunger death in Kashmir in last more than 5 decades. There are more than 7,000 people who die every day of hunger in India. Of course, this was not the case 100 years ago, but this is part of the struggle. In Kashmir, the continuous struggle has produced achievements. One of the achievements of our struggle in early 50s was successful land reforms. You don't have an example of a parallel of the land reforms in Jammu and Kashmir in entire Asia. And then we get lessons from people in India who tell us about equity, who tell us about fairness, who tell us about development. Thank you for those lessons. But we have learned our lessons a very hard way through our own struggle. We know that in Kashmir we have, of course, our own weaknesses as well. But I don't think that, and most of us in Kashmir don't think that we would need lessons from a country which has failed its own people. Indians are still fighting to get clean water to drink. Indians are still fighting homelessness. Indians are still fighting prejudice. You still have Dalit rights movement in India after 70 years of India's independence. You still have practices of different kinds of violations of women in the name of rituals and rituals like even sati. We don't need lessons, but what we actually expected people of India in last 7 decades was that they would hear us. They would have empathy for people of Kashmir. But what we have seen is that there is jingoism when it comes to Kashmir. Indian people incite, I'm not saying all Indian people, a very big section of Indian population incites violence against people of Kashmir. There are many cities in India where we find it difficult to find a place in a hotel. In most of the North Indian cities, they call it integral part. Kashmir is the integral part, but there is no space for people of Kashmir in India. There is no love for people of Kashmir in India. Nations are bound together on love, on the principles of love. But if there is no love for Kashmiri people, if they are suspects, if they are traitors, if they are all the bad names, all the bad adjectives which I described earlier. So, what is this integral part philosophy? I think it's exactly what was happening in India's independence movement, which was always becoming very Hindu in its orientation and expression. Gandhi would call clearly that he wanted India to be a Ram Rajya, and Modi is making that dream fulfill. A lot of people disagree with me, but I have this counter question. A secular person like Muhammad Ali Jinnah, why did he demand Pakistan? It was because of the behavior of the hegemonic Hindus in the Congress. Who were they in the Congress? Hindu Mahasabha. If Hindu Mahasabha was so comfortable in the Congress, I think that also speaks about the health of the Indian freedom struggle then. That what was going on then in the Indian freedom struggle, these difficult questions were not asked. These difficult questions remain there, and that's why people like Modi are relevant today. These difficult questions had to be asked then. Instead of asking those difficult questions, what happened was that people like Muhammad Ali Jinnah felt discriminated. And the idea of India, the way it is expressed by even children in schools, it's quite scary because, and I think it's a very deceptive, remarkable achievement of India that it claims to be a democracy, it claims to be a secular state on one side, and on the other side calls India as Bharat Mata. It's a very Hindu concept of describing a country. And when we talk about Kashmir in different forums in India, a lot of young people ask this question to me that how can we allow India, the map of India, the map of this goddess of India to be dismembered? And Kashmir happens to be the head of this map of India, the goddess of India. How can we allow dismemberment of this head? And that's the problem. That in India, the Hindu conceptualization of nationhood has been allowed to happen. It has been allowed to happen by a party which claimed to be secular. It has been allowed to happen by institutions which sweared in the name of secularism. So if all of this was happening, uh, why do you think Kashmiris would take Indian promises seriously? In Kashmir, we have the most earliest law of cow slaughter ban comes from Kashmir also. But that was the time when we were under Dogra rule, the oppressive rule of Dogra, those Dogras who in 1846 purchased Kashmir and Kashmiri land from the British government for 75 lakh Nanak Shahi, the currency of the Punjab then. So that insult, that government, when they had a cow slaughter ban, we understood because it was an oppressive colonial regime which was working closely with the British. But even in the post-independence era, the same law which we had in Kashmir in an oppressive regime was very conveniently allowed to be passed by all Congress-ruled states. So there is this facade, there is this deception in India, very clearly the way India has been able to become a Hindu majority country also, but yet claim the benefits of being a secular country at the international level. Today Modi, when he goes to UN, he quotes Gandhi. But when he is back home, he praises Godse. These deceptions are possible in India and nowhere else. These lies are possible. This is so convenient for them. They think that in this age, they can speak something in India and something in Europe and something in America, and people would not make out the difference. People understand this lie. We have seen also the kind of racism we suffer in India. Last year there was a minister who said that when they were negating the allegations of racism against the African students in India, they said that, but we have the South Indian dark people also living with us. But today they are saying that Kashmiris are fair. So this concept of skin color, of the Hindu hegemonic groups have been speaking about this. I sometimes feel that they hate Kashmiris because Kashmiris have a different color. Kashmiris have a different facial features. Of course, all of us are equal. It hardly matters for Kashmiri people whether we look fairer or not. But they have made us conscious. They have made us conscious about this. And they are investing into these kind of ideas in Kashmir also, making Kashmiris feel superior about their color. It was done by, we have Saraswat Brahmins in Kashmir who are called as Kashmiri Pandits. So there is this cultural superiority and race superiority which was expressed very publicly and invested in the society and in Kashmir. But Kashmiris are very conscious of this nonsense, that this is a nonsense and we don't need to learn it from India. I want to actually focus now my last few words on the dialogue which India held with us or with Pakistan. Every time there was pressure from international community, they took refuge in dialogue, and there was some dialogue organized, and it would take years and no results would come. Then militancy, when it happened, there was pressure, and the previous BJP government did some misadventures like the nuclear tests, and after that there was Kargil war, and finally they were pressured to have a dialogue with Pakistan. But before dialogue, what happened is that there was this Operation Parakaram. This was after Indian Parliament was attacked. There is a different story about Indian Parliament attack, but I would not go into that. I would just speak about after this Indian Parliament was attacked. Indian government claimed that they would go for war, and they did war preparedness, and they sent army to the war position on the border. For around 11 months, Indian army was eyeball to eyeball with the Pakistani army, and there was fear that the war might start. And BJP was obviously doing this to consolidate its vote bank, because in India it sells well to be seen as anti-Pakistan, to be seen as anti-Muslim and not appease. So they call it not appeasing Muslims, but actually it means that anti-Muslim. So when this was happening, this eyeball to eyeball confrontation, Indian army was asked to mine the border. So they laid landmines all along. And after 11 months of pressure by international community, particularly by US and European Union, finally India decided to call off, and the army was called back to the peacetime positions. But what happened was, which was never said to people of India, without fighting a war, India lost 840 armed forces because of landmines. Landmines which were laid and landmines which were demined later. For this demining process, 840 Indian armed forces men were killed. And the credit goes to Vajpayee, who a lot of people today celebrate as moderate fascist. As compared to, we are coming to the age where Modi might be called as moderate fascist because Yogi Adityanath is in the line. And when this, these questions were never asked by Indian people. No accountability was ever sought because there is a blind faith on government when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to Pakistan. On all other issues, people of India still question. But when it comes to Kashmir, there are no questions asked. So after this 840 armed forces personnel were killed, there was dialogue. And in this dialogue, people of Kashmir were involved in back-channel diplomacy. There was, from 2002 to 2009, these are 8 years. In these 8 years, there were several initiatives of confidence-building measures, back-channel diplomacy, several things happened. And also we had, in the first time, Trans-LOC bus, the East Kashmir and West Kashmir, the Indian administered Kashmir and the Pakistani administered Kashmir people had the opportunity to meet each other first time. So this bus service was started then, after 1947. That was our natural route, by the way. There was no route which we had ever with India. So the only route which we had was Jhelum Valley route, which connected us from Srinagar to Muzaffarabad, and Muzaffarabad to Lahore, and Lahore to Amritsar. There was no other road which we had. So this is our historical route, which was restored in 2005. And then in 2009, there was restoration of trade link between the two Kashmirs. And also there was later, after Mumbai attacks, the dialogue got disrupted, but there was secret dialogue which was going on, which was called as secret dialogue by P. Chidambaram, the then Home Minister. So this dialogue was going on. So in this period of dialogue, rhetoric of peace, when India and Pakistan had ceasefire on border, what was happening in Kashmir? This is a very important question. In Kashmir, the war was still going on. People were still being killed. 14,000 people lost their lives in these 8 years when there was rhetoric of peace, confidence building measures, secret dialogue, all kinds of things. Out of these 14,000 people, 3,404 were civilians. And 2,451 were Indian Armed Forces personnel, including the police. And 7,500 were alleged to be militants. We don't know whether they were really all militants or not, because some of the cases we have known that they were fake encounters. And some civilians were killed in those fake encounters. So, so after this, because when this all was happening and dialogue was disrupted, Kashmiri people did not lose hope. Despite all difficulties in the region, despite India and Pakistan fighting a proxy war with each other in Afghanistan, despite a lot of mess in South Asia, Kashmiris did not lose hope. We continued our struggle, and the struggle actually changed its mode. Previously, the collective expression which was supported was militancy, and by 2008 onwards, it was people's participation in political protests. So there was massive public uprising. So in 2008, we saw massive public rallies in which more than 1.5 million people participated. So this spectacles of Azadi, spectacles of pro-freedom protests which were created, India got really scared of that. There was a lot of negative publicity. A lot of Indian writers started writing, which included people like Arundhati Roy and many others who wrote that Kashmir needs Azadi as much as India needs Azadi from Kashmir. So there was this public opinion building in India after those protests. And that's what again pressurized government of India to curb these protests. And what they did was that in the subsequent year, which is 2010 onwards, till now, till last year until this day, all these protests have been criminalized. They don't allow any protest rally, even if it's peaceful. Last year, you have heard that there are stone pelting episodes, but there were 367 peaceful rallies which were not disrupted and which happened very peacefully. There was no stone pelting, there was no killing, no injury, because these were rallies which were allowed to happen. But no one actually talked to people of India about it. No one reported this, but we have documented this. We have documented proofs for these meetings which took place in Kashmir last year. In the year 2010 to 2017, these are also 8 years. In these 8 years, when we were protesting, when there is stone pelting, when India is claiming that situation has become bad, because it's India which claims situation is very bad, very hostile, militancy is increasing. What has happened is that there are deaths taking place. The total number of civilians who have got killed in these 8 years, as compared to the previous 8 years, which had 3,404 civilian deaths, these 8 years have had only 600 civilian killings. Very bad. But is there some alarm bell ringing in your head that 600 killings as compared to the previous 8 years, 3,404 civilian killings? Yes, there is a question which has to be asked, that the civilian deaths have come down. Of course, militant deaths have also come down, armed forces deaths have come down. But why is then everyone saying Kashmir situation is burning? Because India feels now miserable in Kashmir to carry forward its occupation. And India feels miserable to kill even a single civilian in Kashmir. So these protests have remarkably given an achievement to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, where we have created, through our protests, our own means to save lives of Kashmiri people. So these protests were having guns in their hands. How can an Indian army chief make such an irresponsible statement in public domain? What he meant was that it would be easier to deal with Kashmiris when they have guns in their hands, when they kill, when they shoot at Indian army, because it would be easy for them to deal with militant Kashmiri than the stone pelter, or much better would have been a completely non-violent protest. Government of India is scared of the non-violent uprising of the Kashmiri people. Today, what is happening in Kashmir is that most of our young people are feeling pressured, are feeling impatience. They feel that they need to represent themselves, because India says that Hurriyat is misleading people, Pakistan is misleading people, and that's the reason why you would see young girls and boys coming out of their college after attending half of their classes. They don't come out in 10 o'clock in the morning, they come out after 1:30. This is also not reported. They attend classes, come out, because Kashmiris believe what has frustrated India is education. The more educated Kashmiris are more radically anti-India. The less educated people or not educated people are easy to be hijacked and exploited. So resistance is very much dependent on the education. So Kashmiris know it better. Again, they don't need any lesson from people in India who say that, why are you not interested in carrying your education? We know what education is. Schooling is not just the only means of education. We have learnt it, and we have learnt it in a very difficult way, what education is. And one small example, it's a distraction, which is that we have around 24,000 Kashmiri students who were offered, who have been given the Prime Minister's special scholarship scheme since 2011 till now. These are scholarships which were given after 2010 protests, because India felt that they will bring a lot of Indian Kashmiri boys to India, 4,000 every year, and give them admissions in different professional colleges and integrate them with India. But what happened is that they met real India. Earlier we met only soldiers. These boys and girls did not go to cosmopolitan cities. They went to cities like Varanasi. They went to cities like Meerut. The people there have expressed their real contempt for Kashmiri people. And people, young Kashmiris who went out to study, have become very radically anti-India. So it is in the cities of India that our children are learning what resistance is and why Kashmiris need to continue this struggle for freedom. So what I was coming to is that these protests are coming in the backdrop, the school protests, people who are coming out of schools, they're coming in the backdrop of last year's sustained protest movement, in which finally India started actually saying that Hurriyat is playing with the career of these children. They're not letting schools open. And there was a lot of propaganda that children of Hurriyat leaders are in foreign countries. But we are Kashmiris, we know who's where. We exactly know. They said that Gilani's sons are abroad. Gilani is an old man. His grandchildren should be abroad. His sons, 2 sons we know, are also old enough to go out and study now in this age. But they said that Gilani's one son is studying somewhere in Malaysia. I mean, for God's sake. I mean, we know our people. And this movement, no one is custodian. Gilani or Mirwais or Yasin Malik, they're not custodians of the movement. It is the people on the street whose pictures you see. They are the custodians of the movement. So when this propaganda was done last year and education was targeted in this propaganda, this year when the schools opened, colleges opened, young people were already prepared that they have to do something this year on their own and represent themselves and show it to the world that what do Kashmiri students want? Because last year, the government of India said, all big ministers said that Kashmiri children want to study. These are just 5% people who are creating trouble. So this year we saw there was an attack on one college in Pulwama where Indian Army wanted to forcibly have a program inside the college premises, and which was refused by children there. So there was protest there and they attacked the students there. It was degree college in Pulwama. And after that, there was protest, and the next day there were protests organized by Kashmir University Students' Union, which is a banned organization. There is no students' union allowed in Jammu and Kashmir in any college or university. But despite that, there are groups which organize these protests, and that's what they're sustaining till now. But it is not that they don't attend classes. It is not that they do these protests every day. They do it on their own convenience whenever they feel like. And the news gets carried. And India feels frustrated, and India says that, look, someone is paying them money. But how many children are getting money by Pakistan? If Pakistan was so rich, India claims to be a shining economy, why doesn't it pay more money to the Kashmiris and buy their loyalty? If it was so easy that Kashmiris are purchasable. If it was so, then they could have very easily purchased, because Pakistan is, the so-called failed country, according to the Indian logic. It has failed long ago. So they could have purchased Kashmiris. They have not been able to purchase Kashmiris. Neither Pakistan will purchase Kashmiris nor Indians can purchase Kashmiris, because Kashmiris are doing this for their own selves, for their own future. What is happening today also significantly is that we have a militant commander who recently said, and these are questions which a lot of you would have for me after this, that there is Islamization also happening in Kashmir. There is radical Islamization happening in Kashmir. So this one young commander recently abused Hurriyat leaders, and before abusing, he actually made a statement asking girls not to come out in the colleges to protest. Because he said in a patriarchal way, your brothers are alive, you don't need to come out. So 2 days later, we saw there's a college in Srinagar called Gandhi College, there was a big protest. A lot of girls came out. One of the girls was wearing hijab, so she was completely covered, and she was showing middle finger to the Indian Armed Forces. And this picture became quite viral in Kashmir. A lot of young Kashmiris said that this middle finger is not just against Indian Army, it's against patriarchy. No one can dictate to Kashmiri girls and boys when to protest and when not to protest. So I think that's an answer Kashmiri young people are giving to the world, that they should not be worried about some voices in Kashmir who are claiming Kashmir to become Islamic State. We are a very democratic society within. We will allow all these opinions to be aired, but not imposed. Whether it is a militant commander or whether it's Indian Army. If we have the courage to fight 700,000 Indian troops, we have the courage to fight some lone voices in Kashmir who claim that they can impose some kind of rule in Kashmir. Kashmiris are very conscious. We will not let that happen. And that was remarkably shown by these young girls and boys who came out on streets. But also when this commander issued a statement against some Hurriyat leaders, what happened is that within 24 hours he was removed from the organization. He was taken out from the Hizbul Mujahideen, and also he was made to retract his statement. Though he has not yet completely retracted, but he has to a certain extent shown remorse, and we believe that his opinion, he has a right to have that opinion. We will not, as what happens in India, that anyone who expresses an opinion is criminalized. We will not do that to him also. He has right to have that opinion, but majority Kashmiris have disliked his opinion. And we have expressed our opinion very clearly in our own local mechanisms wherever we can express it, and also on social networking sites, and leaders have given statements, and he was removed from the party. And that tells you what is the motive of the Kashmiri movement. It is liberation from India. Very clearly. There is no two opinion about liberation. And the younger generation is very well prepared today to take this struggle to the logical conclusion. I would just in the end say that, I said it in some other programs as well, that some of Kashmiri commentators, but also Indian writers, have said that there is a lot of hopelessness and frustration in Kashmir. I don't see that. There is hopelessness against India, but there is a lot of hope amongst the young people for the freedom of Kashmir. They are not hopeless. They are hopeful, and that's why they are continuing the struggle so vigorously. And I am quite sure that maybe my elders who continued this, who started this struggle, they may not have achieved the liberation of Kashmir, but what they had achieved is my generation who became part of the movement. And I today am very happy that younger people who are younger to me are far more dedicated and far more creatively engaged in this movement. They will not let this movement go without a logical conclusion, which is resolution of Kashmir dispute. And most of the Kashmiris, the resolution is that it is an occupation. The only resolution of a military occupation is ending the occupation. There are no negotiations on ending the occupation. So that's the hope in Kashmir, and that hope is alive, and I'm very sure that people will continue the struggle and save more lives. That's what we want to do, because in Kashmir, elsewhere as well, people who become part of revolutionary movements, they say that they are willing to give life for this cause. We in Kashmir, a lot of us, say that the struggle is to live and not die, and we will live for this movement and not die. Thank you.